What would you do if a silent 12-year-old girl calmed a billionaire's attack dog in front of 1,000 witnesses and then refused to say a single word about it? The humid summer air hung heavy over Buckhead, Georgia, as a procession of luxury cars wound their way up the stone-paved drive of Elmhurst Estate home to Sterling Maddox, one of America's most feared and admired billionaires. Spotlights swept across the manicured lawns, while valet attendants in white gloves rushed to open doors, offering crisp bows to Atlanta's elite as they stepped out. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and custom Teslas gleamed under the southern moonlight. The guests arrived like royalty silken dresses, brushing marble steps, tuxedos pressed to perfection, cufflinks glittering like tiny declarations of power. Everyone who was someone had come, not just to be charitable, but to be seen being charitable. At the heart of it all stood Sterling Maddox, 58 years old, owner of Maddox Technologies, and unofficial kingmaker of Georgia's social and political scene. His face, cut from marble and framed by silvered hair, revealed nothing. As he shook hands and delivered calculated smiles, the tension in his jaw hinted that every move was rehearsed. Sterling didn't host galas for fun. He hosted them to remind the world who held the reins. Inside the mansion, chandeliers imported from Prague sent prisms of light spinning across silk-covered walls. Outside, white tents stretched across the lawn, housing buffet tables with foie gras, smoked quail eggs, and 12-year-aged scotch. A string quartet played Vivaldi under a canopy of string lights, filling the night with sterile elegance. But beneath the grandeur, the unspoken lines were sharp and cruel. All the guests, every last one of them, were white. All the servers, bartenders, kitchen staff, and valets were not. They moved silently, dressed in black and trained to be invisible, smiling just enough, standing just close enough, and never ever speaking, unless spoken to. In the kitchen, Melody Wells, 34 years old and head caterer for the evening, stood over a tray of lamb cutlets, her hands moving swiftly despite the heat. This was her biggest job in months. A last-minute replacement after the original catering firm backed out. It was a golden opportunity wrapped in barbed wire. "Mom, I finished sorting the dessert trays," said a soft voice behind her. Melody turned and saw her daughter, Autumn, 12 years old, slim, braided cornrows, and wide, observant eyes. She wore a simple blue dress and clutched a worn silver harmonica like it was a secret treasure. "Thank you, baby," Melody said, brushing sweat from her brow and gently touching her daughter's shoulder. "You can sit now, all right? It's about to get hectic in here." Autumn nodded, but didn't move. Unlike the other workers' children who waited quietly in the back break room, Autumn had stayed close to the kitchen, where she could watch but not disturb. She had always been that way, quiet, thoughtful, and deeply sensitive to sound, touch, and light. Autumn had autism. Loud noises overwhelmed her. Sudden touches could trigger panic. Strangers staring made her freeze. But music made sense to her. Especially the harmonica, her father's harmonica, the one he used to play before he died 3 years ago. She hadn't spoken much since then, not with words. "Keep that safe tonight," Melody whispered, eyeing the harmonica. "And remember, we don't belong out there. We're just here to work. These people—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Don't see us unless we're holding a tray." Autumn didn't reply. She didn't have to. She understood more than her mother ever gave her credit for. Even at 12, she had learned the rules of invisibility. She tucked the harmonica back into her dress pocket and quietly moved to the far corner of the kitchen, watching, absorbing, staying small. Meanwhile, outside the swinging doors, the party sparkled on. "Father, the Wainwrights are here," said Chase Maddox, Sterling's 26-year-old son. Tall, handsome, and arrogant, Chase wore his privilege like an expensive cologne, overpowering and impossible to ignore. "Wonderful," Sterling replied. "Their donation is vital this year." Inside, the music shifted from classical to jazz. The lights dimmed slightly. The crowd buzzed with anticipation. Sterling Maddox took the stage with a microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "tonight we do more than raise money. Tonight we raise the bar." A murmur of approval rippled through the guests. "I have a challenge for you. A chance to test not only your courage, but your connection to something greater than yourself." Whispers spread. People leaned in. Sterling gestured to a velvet-covered crate being wheeled on stage by handlers. "Inside this cage is Titan, a 3-time national champion, one of the most powerful Rottweilers ever bred. Loyal, intelligent, and fiercely protective." When the cloth was pulled away, the crowd gasped. Titan stood tall, muscles coiled, black fur gleaming like polished obsidian. His eyes scanned the crowd with unsettling awareness. "I'm placing a wager," Sterling announced. $1 million to anyone who can calm Titan in under 2 minutes. No tools, no food, no tricks. Just you and him. The room erupted in murmurs, laughter, excitement. Danger disguised as spectacle. Back in the kitchen, Autumn peered through the small window in the swinging door. She wasn't interested in the crowd or the money. Her eyes were on Titan. She didn't see a monster. She saw herself. Titan didn't bark. He didn't growl. He didn't need to. The massive Rottweiler stood motionless in the center of the stage, his body rippling with controlled strength, his deep-set eyes scanning the room like a soldier reading a battlefield. He didn't look at Sterling Maddox. He didn't look at the audience. He looked through them. Autumn Wells, still watching from the kitchen doorway, recognized something. Not power, not rage. Fear. She saw it in the way Titan's ears stayed slightly lowered, in the way his thick tail barely moved, in the way his tongue flicked out to touch his nose, fast, nervous, a signal no one in the crowd understood. But Autumn did, because she had done those same things when the world got too loud, too bright, too close, when her body couldn't handle the chaos around her. Titan wasn't being fierce. He was being overwhelmed. And yet, the crowd clapped like they were watching a show at the circus. Sterling Maddox stood tall beside his prized dog, microphone in hand, voice rich with theatrical charm. 2 minutes, he repeated, is all you get. If Titan sits calmly just for 30 seconds, you win the million. The challenge echoed across the lawn like a dare wrapped in money. The tension electrified the air. Beside him, Chase Maddox, his son, sauntered out holding a silver briefcase, which he opened with a smug grin. The crowd leaned forward to glimpse the neatly stacked $100 bills inside. "This is what confidence looks like," Chase said, raising his whiskey glass. "Let's see who's brave enough to earn it." One by one, the volunteers stepped up. The first was a famous dog trainer, Arnold Pittman, star of several TV shows about fixing problem pets. Dressed in khaki and confidence, Arnold entered the glass enclosure, like a man walking into a well-rehearsed scene. "Easy, boy," he cooed, holding out a hand. Titan lunged. The chain snapped tight with a metallic screech, stopping the dog inches from Arnold's fingers. The crowd gasped. Arnold stumbled back, face pale, ego shaken. For the next 2 minutes, he tried commands, treats, even crouching down. Nothing worked. When the buzzer rang, he exited, sweating and humiliated, his reputation left in shambles on the grass. "Guess Titan doesn't like TV personalities," Sterling quipped. His voice dipped in sarcasm. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The next was Victoria Tate, wife of Deputy Chief Warren Tate, the city's most powerful law enforcement officer and Sterling's longtime ally. She made it only 20 seconds before fleeing, losing one of her heels in the process. The crowd roared with laughter. Glasses clinked. Someone offered a round of bets on who would last longer, the dog or the guests. Autumn flinched. None of this felt like entertainment to her. It felt like watching people poke at a frightened animal the same way others used to poke at her when she didn't respond fast enough in class or flinched at sudden noise. Behind her, in the chaos of the kitchen, Melody Wells, Autumn's mother, kept glancing over her shoulder. "Has anyone seen Autumn?" she asked aloud, panic starting to rise. "She was just watching the dog thing a minute ago," a young server replied. Melody pushed past the swinging doors just in time to spot her daughter slipping through the crowd, walking slowly toward the stage, eyes locked on the trembling Rottweiler in the glass cage. "Autumn," Melody hissed, trying to keep her voice low. "Get back here." But Autumn didn't respond. Her entire focus was on Titan. She saw his panting, his pacing, his darting eyes. He was trapped, and he knew it. A security guard blocked Melody's path. "Kitchen staff need to stay in the kitchen," he said firmly, hand resting on the taser clipped to his belt. Melody's voice cracked. "That's my daughter." "Should have left her at home," the guard replied coldly. "Now get back to work before there's a problem." His eyes dropped pointedly to the catering badge on her apron. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. Back on stage, the failures kept coming. A retired military K9 handler couldn't last even a minute. A veterinarian brought calming spray, immediately disqualified. A woman claiming to be an animal psychic took one look at Titan's teeth and left without speaking. The crowd was enthralled and drunk. Chase Maddox, now several glasses deep, laughed loudly. "These fools really think they have a shot at my dad's money," he slurred to a friend. "This is like watching the South Side try to get a bank loan." The friend chuckled. The security guard nearby didn't. His jaw tightened. But he said nothing. Autumn, now near the front, stood perfectly still. She didn't care about the money. She didn't care about the spectacle. She cared about Titan. His breathing was too fast. His eyes were wild, his legs trembled, and no one noticed. Except her. Suddenly, Sterling raised the mic again. "Seems we've run out of contenders," he said smoothly. "Unless," his eyes locked on Autumn. "We have a volunteer." Gasps scattered across the crowd like broken glass. Several guests laughed uncomfortably. Others stared at the small black girl in the blue dress, standing barefoot on the lawn, holding nothing but a harmonica. Melody, desperate, pushed through the crowd. "She's just a child." "She's with me," Sterling said, voice as cold as steel. And the challenge was open to anyone. The moment hung in the air like a match above gasoline. And Autumn? She reached into her pocket and gripped the harmonica her father had given her. The same one she used when words wouldn't come. The same one that made sense when nothing else did. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She just nodded and walked toward the glass. The crowd parted like silk curtains in a quiet theater. No one clapped. No one cheered. They just stared. A barefoot, brown-skinned girl, no taller than a side table, walked slowly toward the enclosure that had already broken the pride of veterans, trainers, and TV stars. She held no leash, no tools, no tricks. Just a dented silver harmonica, clutched tightly in one small hand. Sterling Maddox raised a hand. "Everyone, silence, please." The murmurs died down. Even the string quartet stopped mid-phrase. Autumn Wells paused at the edge of the glass, her eyes not on the crowd, not on the cameras, not even on Sterling. Her gaze was fixed on Titan. The dog was pacing again, shoulders hunched, head low, panting. His paws scratched the floor with the frantic rhythm of something trapped, not something dangerous. The whites of his eyes were visible. He was trying to keep himself together. Melody Wells, still blocked by the guard near the front, whispered with desperate clarity, "Please, don't let her go in." But Sterling didn't even look at her. He turned to Autumn. "Do you accept the challenge?" Autumn didn't answer. Instead, she lifted the harmonica to her lips and blew a single trembling note. A note that sounded like a whisper across a canyon. A note that made Titan freeze. Then she nodded and stepped into the cage. Gasps rippled through the audience. One man muttered, "Where's her father?" Another whispered, "She's not even speaking. Is this a joke?" But nobody stopped her. Nobody dared. A timer clicked to life on the screen overhead. To a countdown. The security latch clicked behind her. Autumn and Titan were now alone, separated from the glittering crowd by inches of thick reinforced glass and a world of difference in understanding. Titan stared at her, muscles locked. He didn't bark, but his nostrils flared. He knew this was different. Autumn didn't move toward him. She didn't make eye contact. She just sat down, cross-legged, small, still, and raised the harmonica to her lips again. The first few notes wobbled soft, uneven. She was scared. But not for herself. She was scared for him, so she kept playing. The song wasn't one the crowd recognized. It wasn't a pop melody or a grand hymn. It was a blues lullaby, slow, mournful, and strangely hopeful. The kind her father had played on nights when the lights flickered, when rent was late, when the world outside was loud and unkind. It was the music that had always brought Autumn back. And now it was reaching Titan. The dog's shoulders slowly relaxed. His breathing began to match the rhythm. He took a step, then another toward her. The audience collectively leaned forward. 118 left. Autumn never looked up. She just played. Her fingers moved instinctively. No sheet music, no plan, just pure connection. Her left leg twitched once from the stress, but she kept the melody steady. Titan circled. The sound wrapped around him like a thread, guiding him closer, gently, silently. His growl faded into a low whine. He sniffed her shoulder, then her lap. Autumn didn't flinch. She just kept playing. Yo 42. The room was so quiet, you could hear the clink of an ice cube dropping into someone's glass. A woman in pearls whispered, "My God, is this actually happening?" A man in the back crossed himself, almost involuntarily. 030. And then Titan laid down. Right beside her, no barking, no lunging. He laid his head gently across her leg, like a child curling up beside their mother. The crowd still froze and exploded into gasps. Several people actually clapped before realizing they weren't supposed to. Sterling Maddox's face tightened, his jaw flexed so hard it looked like stone cracking. Chase Maddox dropped his drink. Melody Wells collapsed into her knees, both hands covering her mouth. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Autumn kept playing. She played until the timer hit 0. Buzz. A loud chime rang out across the lawn. And Titan didn't even flinch. Security rushed forward to open the enclosure. The handlers looked unsure, afraid of breaking the moment. Even Sterling hesitated, his hand hovering near his watch, as though the time was wrong, the outcome somehow mistaken. Autumn lowered the harmonica. She looked at Titan. And finally she smiled, not wide, not for show. Just enough. Titan licked her wrist. Back outside, the crowd surged forward. Questions flew like confetti. Who is she? Was this staged? Is she some kind of animal whisperer? Someone snapped a photo. Someone else started a live stream. But Melody reached her daughter first. She pushed past the guards, past the cameras, past Sterling's icy glare. She fell to her knees and pulled Autumn into her arms, holding her as if she might vanish at any second. "You did it," she whispered into Autumn's hair. "Baby girl, you did it." Autumn didn't say a word. She just slid the harmonica back into her pocket. Titan followed them, tail wagging low and slow, as if choosing his new pack. And for the first time that evening, nobody told them to go back to the kitchen. The footage spread like wildfire. By sunrise the next morning, over 2 million views had flooded across platforms Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, even LinkedIn. People weren't just watching a video, they were watching a miracle. A little black girl. No words, no fear, no tricks. Just a harmonica and a heart full of something the whole world seemed to have forgotten understanding. Who is this girl? Read one headline. Autistic angel calms prize Rottweiler stuns billionaire host, read another. But not everyone was cheering. Inside the glass towers of Maddox Holdings, Sterling Maddox sat behind his 12-foot mahogany desk, staring at the looping footage, the soft whine of Titan as he lay beside Autumn, the crowd frozen in stunned awe, the soft music echoing from that battered harmonica, and most of all, the girl. She didn't speak. She didn't gloat. She just sat there, calm and composed, while his million-dollar showmanship crumbled in silence. Sterling's fingers curled into a fist. This wasn't supposed to happen. In the boardroom down the hall, Chase Maddox was pacing. "She's everywhere," he snapped, waving his phone. "Every influencer's reposting her like she's some kind of child prophet, and now people are dragging us in the comments." He scrolled rapidly, reading aloud. "What kind of man uses a scared dog for a party stunt? Did you see how that little girl was ignored until she made him look like a fool? Systemic racism wrapped in caviar." Chase tossed the phone across the table. It landed with a thud. Deputy Chief Warren Tate, seated near the end of the table, cleared his throat. "This could get messy," he said. "The press is already asking questions about how the girl got through security. Someone leaked that her mother was staff." Sterling didn't look up. "She wasn't supposed to be on stage," he said quietly. Chase raised an eyebrow. "You invited her up?" "I offered a challenge," Sterling replied, his voice cold. "Not a revolution." Meanwhile, across town, Melody Wells sat on her worn couch, a bowl of soup untouched on the table. Autumn lay curled beside her, still in her blue dress, hugging Tita, now adopted, now home. Home. For the first time in a long time, Melody felt like she wasn't just surviving. But the phone wouldn't stop ringing. First, it was news stations, then charities, then brands offering endorsement deals. But what chilled her most was the voicemail from a blocked number. "This is a courtesy call from Maddox Holdings. We'd appreciate it if you and your daughter refrained from making any further public appearances. The attention is causing confusion." And that could lead to complications. Complications? Melody's spine stiffened. Autumn had done something beautiful. Something healing. Now, they wanted her silent. The next morning, a thick manila envelope was slipped under their apartment door. Inside, a cease and desist letter, polite on the surface, threatening underneath. They accused Melody of violating contractual confidentiality as a hired vendor and warned her against misrepresenting the nature of the event. She wasn't misrepresenting anything. They were. Sterling's team was rewriting the narrative, framing the challenge as a pre-screened demonstration, claiming Autumn was trained, implying the outcome was orchestrated for attention. But the footage told another story, and someone else was about to make sure it stayed undeniable. That afternoon, a woman in a charcoal suit knocked on their door. She wore no badge, but her presence was commanding. "Miss Wells, my name is Lieutenant Naomi Grant, Internal Affairs." Melody hesitated. "I'm not here to arrest you," Naomi said, calmly. "I'm here because someone needs to protect your daughter." Melody stepped aside. They sat at the tiny kitchen table. Autumn stayed in her room, playing soft notes from the harmonica, barely audible but steady. Naomi leaned forward. "There are people trying to bury this story. They're pressuring news outlets. They're threatening legal action, but your daughter did something that exposed a much bigger truth." Melody raised an eyebrow. "Which is? That girl calmed a dog better than any professional in the room. And every powerful man there ignored her, until she made them look human." Naomi pulled out a folder. Inside, photos, security logs, timestamps. "I've been tracking patterns of selective policing and forced silence at events like these. But I've never had proof until now." Melody's voice trembled. "What do you want from us?" "Not a thing," Naomi said. "I'm going to take this to the state board." You don't need to fight alone anymore. But Sterling Maddox wasn't done. He called a press conference the next morning. Flanked by Chase and two attorneys, Sterling stood behind a sleek podium with the Maddox Foundation logo printed on front. He smiled, but his eyes were distant. "We are proud of all the young talent showcased at our gala," he began. "But recent events have led to confusion about the purpose of our canine demonstration." He paused. "We want to be clear, no child was ever in danger. The dog was secured. The challenge was symbolic." Then he turned the knife. "We're grateful to young Autumn Wells for her bravery, but we caution against sensationalizing events that were carefully monitored for safety and structure. In other words, you saw what we wanted you to see, but the people weren't buying it." In the comments section of every news live stream, the tide was turning. She didn't say a word, but she spoke louder than any of them. They're scared, and that's why they're lying. Protect Autumn Wells at all costs. And in a corner of the internet, a new hashtag began to trend. Hashtag Let Her Play. The letter came in a gold-embossed envelope. It wasn't emailed. It wasn't texted. It was hand-delivered. Melody opened it with trembling fingers, half expecting another threat. But this wasn't from Maddox Holdings. It was from the National Foundation for Arts and Inclusion, a respected organization that rarely made headlines but quietly funded some of the most important cultural shifts in the country. They were inviting Autumn Wells to perform live at the Capitol Hall, Gala for Social Justice, scheduled just 2 weeks away in Washington, D.C. This event, the letter read, has always celebrated voices that cannot be silenced. We believe your daughter is one of those voices. Melody blinked at the words. She read them again, then again. She looked over at Autumn, who was humming softly while brushing Titan's coat with slow, rhythmic strokes. The harmonica lay beside her like a sleeping friend. And just like that, the decision was made. But the moment the invitation went public, the backlash began. First came the headlines twisting the story. Overnight sensation or carefully scripted stunt. Mother of miracle girl cashes in on viral moment. Gala dog Karma refuses to speak autism or media strategy. Then came the anonymous emails. Keep her off that stage or else. You're exploiting her. We see you. Even the school district called, citing safety concerns if Autumn returned to class. Melody held the phone tightly, trying not to shake. So you're punishing her because she played music and didn't get bitten? Ma'am, the voice said, flat, bureaucratic. It's about optics. But it wasn't about optics. It was about power. And Autumn had accidentally disrupted an entire ecosystem of control without even saying a word. Lieutenant Naomi Grant returned 2 days later, this time with a protective order and a list of persons of interest. At the top of that list, Chase Maddox. He'd been recorded in a private gathering joking about how the dog challenge was a social filter, a way to let the wrong folks expose themselves. What does that mean? Melody asked. Naomi exhaled. It means the challenge was never meant to be won, especially not by a child, especially not by a black child. Meanwhile, in a sleek boardroom high above Atlanta, Sterling Maddox leaned back in his chair, watching the latest news cycle with growing disdain. Let her go to D.C., he muttered. Chase's eyes widened. What? Sterling's tone was ice. Let the media dance with her. But I want her controlled when she gets there, quiet, invisible again. He turned to his assistant. Call in favors. Security protocols. And if anyone talks about the dog again, remind them who funds their campaign. He stared out the window toward a city he thought he owned. No one makes me the villain, he said under his breath. But Autumn wasn't thinking about villains. She was thinking about notes. In the week before the performance, she barely slept. Not from anxiety, but from something deeper urgency. She practiced under the moonlight, letting the breeze guide her rhythms. Titan never left her side. He'd become her shadow, her guardian, her soft protector in a loud world. Melody watched her daughter, and realized something no school report had ever said out loud. Autumn wasn't behind. Autumn was ahead. Autumn. Her music didn't just calm dogs, it calmed people. It reminded them how to listen to pain, to joy, to silence. When they arrived in DC, the air was cold and electric. Capitol Hall shimmered under spotlights and scaffolding, with red carpets rolled out for senators, scholars, celebrities, but the buzz wasn't about them. It was about the girl with the harmonica. The press was relentless. Is she nervous? Will she speak on stage? Can she really perform live? But Autumn just smiled softly. Her fingers curled around the harmonica in her coat pocket like a secret weapon. Inside the green room, Melody helped adjust her daughter's dress. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," she whispered. Autumn shook her head gently. She knew. 10 minutes before showtime, a security breach triggered backstage lockdown. A man in a Maddox Foundation blazer had tried to slip into the performer's entrance with falsified credentials. He was caught. Inside his briefcase, documents smearing Melody's past, doctored footage of Autumn, and a burner phone linked to a private Maddox security contractor. Naomi, now assigned to Autumn's case, arrived within minutes. "Someone tried to sabotage her set," she said grimly, "but we stopped it. You're clear to perform." Melody looked shaken. Autumn looked unfazed. She simply reached for the harmonica. When the stage lights dimmed and the announcer called her name, the room fell silent. Thousands waited. Autumn stepped into the light alone. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She just played. The first note was soft, like a memory. Then the melody opened a story told without a single word. It was part lullaby, part mourning song, part rebellion disguised as hope. The music climbed and dipped, carrying grief and gratitude in equal measure. No flashing lights, no background choir, just one girl and her breath. By the time she reached the final note, the crowd had forgotten their phones, their speeches, their titles. They had remembered how to feel, and when the last sound faded into stillness, the entire room stood. Not out of politeness, out of reverence. Outside the building, Sterling Maddox watched from the back of a black SUV. He didn't clap. He didn't speak. He just rolled up the tinted window and drove away. No pyrotechnics. No speech, no bright celebrity cameo, just a girl, a harmonica, and a stillness that refused to be denied. Autumn Wells's performance at Capitol Hall wasn't just music. It was testimony to pain, to power, to a presence so real it made powerful people uncomfortable. By the next morning, her melody had been streamed over 50 million times. One tweet read, "She didn't say a word, but I've never felt so heard in my life." Another, "Autumn Wells reminded America that the most important voice might come from someone the system never planned to hear." Back home, Melody Wells didn't sleep for 36 hours straight. Her phone never stopped buzzing. Agents, press, brands, think tanks, advocacy groups all wanted a piece of her daughter's silence. But Autumn didn't notice the noise. She was in the backyard, barefoot, coaxing Titan through a new tune, playing one soft note and letting him tilt his head, ears twitching. The game continued like that for nearly an hour. A girl and her dog, sinking breath and sound. "Do you want to do this again?" Melody finally asked, standing by the back door. Autumn shrugged. She wasn't chasing a spotlight, she was following a feeling. Meanwhile, the world had started asking harder questions. Why was a child staff member allowed to walk into a dangerous demo? Why did the Maddox team try to bury her afterward? Why were they suddenly deleting files and correcting footage? Lieutenant Naomi Grant was asking too, but in official channels. Using her clearance through internal affairs, she submitted a subpoena for security logs from the Maddox gala. What came back was disturbing. Certain files had been wiped clean just 1 hour after Autumn's performance. Surveillance footage from the dog holding area? Missing. Internal emails between Chase Maddox and PR teams carried keywords like contain optics, minimize urban exposure, and fabricate structure. This wasn't just a cover-up. This was systemic manipulation. Across the city, a different kind of storm was brewing. Julian Welser, civil rights attorney and Autumn's uncle, held a press conference outside Atlanta's City Hall. "My niece did something extraordinary," he began. "Not because she's a performer, but because she's proof of something this country refuses to admit. Brilliance doesn't always shout." He held up a printout of the cease and desist letter Melody had received weeks ago. "This," he said, shaking the paper, "is what fear of a child's power looks like." He called for a federal investigation into Maddox Holdings, citing discrimination, reckless endangerment, and obstruction. Some called it grandstanding. Others called it the beginning of something bigger. Inside Maddox Tower, Sterling Maddox was losing control. Not of his money, of his narrative. His team had been working overtime to craft a new story, that the gala was misrepresented, that Autumn had been coached, that the footage had been edited for drama. But nothing stuck. Because the footage was raw, because the girl never spoke, because the truth didn't need a rewrite. Then came the email leak. An anonymous whistleblower sent thousands of internal Maddox Holdings emails to a public watchdog organization. Included in those emails, language labeling certain gala invitees as low-visibility demographics, instructions to ignore any Southside claims unless there's a legal threat. A chilling phrase in one memo: "We don't uplift. We entertain." The media went nuclear. Melody tried to shield Autumn. She turned off the news, blocked reporters, declined every sponsorship. But Autumn still heard whispers at the grocery store. "That's her. Poor baby, caught in all that mess. She doesn't look special." One afternoon, Autumn sat on the porch, harmonica untouched, and asked her mother, "Did I do something wrong?" Melody knelt beside her. "No, baby. They just don't know what it means when someone like you becomes undeniable." She cupped Autumn's face gently. "They're not mad at you. They're scared of what you remind them." Autumn's story reached schools next. Teachers across the country began playing her performance in classrooms, using it to teach emotional intelligence, neurodiversity, and the power of nonverbal communication. A second-grade teacher in Des Moines wrote, "My students were silent for 10 minutes after watching her. Then one boy whispered, 'I feel like she was playing my feelings. We've never had a moment like that in my career.'" Meanwhile, non-profits started campaigns called Let Her Play, building music therapy programs for autistic students using harmonicas as core tools. Autumn never asked for any of it. But she inspired all of it. Back in D.C., hearings began. Naomi Grant testified under oath. Julian Wells delivered opening arguments. But the most powerful moment came when Titan was called into the courtroom. He walked up to Autumn and curled up at her feet, just like he had that night on stage without a single command. The judge sat in silence for nearly a minute before whispering, "Noted." At the end of the week, Sterling Maddox stepped down from his board chair for personal reasons. Chase Maddox disappeared from social media entirely, and Autumn, she went home. She planted marigolds in the backyard. She taught Titan how to sit without fear. She played music every morning at sunrise, not because the world was watching, but because the world finally knew how to listen. The envelope was white, no gold trim, no brand seal. Just an eagle embossed in raised silver ink. When Melody opened it, her hands trembled. The White House requests the presence of Autumn Wells at the National Ceremony for American Courage. It wasn't just a performance invitation. It was recognition. From the president, from a nation, from a system that had, for so long, failed to see children like Autumn as anything more than invisible. Melody clutched the letter to her chest and whispered, They see you now, baby. Autumn didn't respond right away. She was feeding Titan pieces of pear from a small plastic bowl. But she looked up, eyes steady, and gave the faintest nod. Yes. News spread fast. Within hours, it became the top story across networks. Autumn Wells invited to perform at White House ceremony. 12-year-old girl who calmed Maddox's dog, now honored by President. But as Autumn's star rose, so did the resistance. In the halls of power, not everyone was applauding. Behind closed doors, advisors and officials debated whether inviting Autumn was politically risky. She's too polarizing, one aide argued. Her presence reminds people of how broken the system still is. Another replied, that's exactly why she should be there. The president didn't hesitate. She speaks without speaking. That's leadership. Meanwhile, in a boardroom at a private club in Georgetown, Sterling Maddox wasn't watching the news. He was watching old footage. Clips of him standing tall, shaking hands, dominating boardrooms. Moments when he controlled the narrative. Now, his legacy was a footnote in Autumn's story. Chase Maddox, looking gaunt and bitter, slammed his drink down. Are we seriously letting this kid take over the country's heart? Sterling said nothing for a long time. Then slowly he picked up the phone, Call the foundation. Pull all sponsorships from the Courage Gala. Chase blinked. That includes veterans programs? Sterling stared blankly. She's costing me more than headlines. She's costing me control. As the White House prepared, so did Autumn. Not for fame. Not for glory, but for truth. She began composing a new melody. It wasn't soft like the first. It had weight echoes of protest songs and lullabies, of marching feet and whispered prayers. It was something older than she was, something deeper than any stage could hold. Melody watched from the hallway as her daughter practiced by moonlight, harmonica glowing under a single desk lamp. She's not performing, she whispered to herself. She's testifying. The night before the ceremony, Melody received a knock at her hotel room. It was Lieutenant Naomi Grant, holding a folder. We've uncovered something, she said grimly. Inside were screenshots, messages from anonymous accounts threatening to disrupt the event. One said, she's not America's story, she's a distraction. Another, if she plays, we walk. All of us. Naomi looked Melody in the eye. There are donors pressuring the White House to pull her from the program. They're calling her too political. Melody's voice shook. She's a child. Naomi nodded. And that's why they're afraid of her, because she doesn't even need to speak to challenge them. At 7:00 p.m. on the night of the gala, the White House lawn glowed under soft lights. Dignitaries filled rows of elegant white chairs. Flags swayed, string music floated in the background. Autumn stood backstage in a navy blue dress, Titan resting at her feet. Melody knelt beside her. You don't have to prove anything, she whispered. You just have to be. Autumn looked toward the stage, then down at her harmonica. She nodded once. The announcer's voice rang out. Tonight, we honor those who show us courage is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a 12-year-old girl with a harmonica. As Autumn walked onto the stage, silence fell across the crowd. No teleprompter, no intro video. Just a chair, a light, and her. She sat, Titan curled beside her. And then she played. The melody pierced the air like a thread, pulling hearts together. This time, it was different. It carried resistance. It carried pride. It carried memory. The tune blended hymns sung in underground churches, songs hummed by mothers on long walks home from night shifts, whispers of children waiting in broken school hallways. It was America's underside, the part few people ever honored in daylight. By the end of the performance, tears flowed down faces in every row. Even the First Lady wept silently, hand over her heart. When Autumn finished, she stood slowly, bowed her head, and exited without a single word. The crowd erupted. Not just applause, reverence, but not everyone clapped. In a shadowy suite across town, Sterling Maddox sat alone watching the live feed. He turned off the TV halfway through. "She's not the future," he muttered. But he was wrong. She already was. Outside the venue, reporters swarmed Melody, begging for a quote. She simply said, "My daughter didn't come to be seen. She came to help us see." And that night, for the first time in decades, the nation listened to a child who never needed a microphone, just breath, and a harmonica, and a reason to play. The flowers had barely begun to wilt on the White House lawn when the call came. Melody answered on the second ring. "This is Dr. Singh at Atlanta General Hospital. I'm afraid your Uncle Julian Wells was brought in this morning. He suffered a massive stroke." The floor shifted beneath her feet. Julian, the man who stood before Congress, who defended Autumn with nothing but truth and thunder in his voice. He was now clinging to life, and Autumn didn't even know yet. Melody sat on the edge of Autumn's bed, unsure how to begin. Autumn was humming quietly, stroking Titan's ears. The harmonica lay beside her like a trusted old friend. "Sweetheart," Melody said softly, "Uncle Julian is sick. He's in the hospital." Autumn's hand stopped moving. She looked up, no tears, no panic, just a long, quiet stare that seemed to ask the one question Melody couldn't answer. Will he come back? At the hospital, Julian lay motionless. His face, once so full of conviction, was slack. Machines beeped softly around him, a mechanical lullaby. Autumn stood at his bedside, harmonica clenched tightly in her fist. For the first time in weeks, she didn't play. She couldn't. The music had left her. The world outside didn't slow down. Reporters still called. Emails still poured in. Offers still arrived daily. But inside that hospital room, time moved differently. Melody watched her daughter shrink into silence, not the powerful kind that moved presidents, but the kind that scared mothers. Autumn wouldn't eat, wouldn't hum, wouldn't touch the harmonica. "She's grieving," the doctors said. But Melody knew it was more than that. Autumn wasn't just mourning her uncle. She was mourning her language, because when words aren't your world, music becomes your way in. And now, the one person who always understood her without needing translation was gone. One morning, Melody found her daughter in the chapel. Autumn sat alone in the front pew, Titan resting beneath the bench, the harmonica on the floor beside her. She was staring at the stained glass window. A dove in mid-flight. "Do you want to talk?" Melody asked gently. Autumn didn't move. Melody sat down beside her and whispered, "You don't have to be strong, baby. It's okay to break a little." Still nothing. So Melody reached for the harmonica and placed it in Autumn's hand, and quietly said, "Let him hear you." The first note was broken, then a pause, then another note, shaky, unsure. But slowly, painfully, Autumn began to stitch together a melody. It wasn't polished, it wasn't pretty. It was raw, it was grief, it was goodbye. Down the hall, a nurse froze mid-step. In the waiting room, a woman dropped her magazine and closed her eyes. Even Julian's heart monitor ticked in rhythm with the tune. It wasn't a performance, it was prayer. The next morning, Julian woke up. Not fully, not perfectly, but his eyes opened. He couldn't speak, but his fingers, they moved. One slow tap against the rail of the bed. Then another. Then 3 in a row, the same rhythm Autumn had played in the chapel the night before. Melody gasped. "He heard her," she whispered. The doctors called it miraculous. The staff called it divine. Autumn just called it music. She began playing again softly, gently, in the hallway each morning, not for the cameras, Not for the headlines, just for healing. And slowly, she began to return. But the world had changed again. Julian's condition became public, and the media, hungry for more drama, turned their spotlight on Autumn once more. Child prodigy faces family crisis. Will she retreat from fame? Musical healer, or just a moment? Some criticized Melody for overexposing her daughter. Others claimed Autumn's silence now proved she was never special to begin with. One headline read, "When the harmonica falls silent, so does the hype." Melody wanted to scream. But Autumn? She just walked to her uncle's bedside, played one soft note, and let it echo longer than any rebuttal could. Lieutenant Naomi Grant visited them at the hospital a few days later. She brought with her something Melody wasn't expecting. A letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside were just 6 words. "I was wrong. She matters. S.M. Sterling Maddox." Melody folded the letter carefully. It didn't erase what had happened, but it was a crack in the stone. And sometimes, cracks let the light in. Julian eventually regained some speech. It was slow, halting, but real. One day, as Autumn played by the window, he whispered, "Still got it, kid." She turned to him with the smallest smile. Then just once, she mouthed a word. "Thanks." It was the first time Melody had ever seen her daughter try to speak aloud. Not for the world, not for a stage, but for him. That night, Autumn sat outside on the porch. The sky was full of stars. Titan lay by her side. The harmonica gleamed under the moonlight. Melody watched from the doorway as her daughter lifted it to her lips again, this time not to grieve, but to begin again, because silence had taught her something even the spotlight never could. It's not how loud you are that makes people listen. It's how true you are when you finally let yourself be heard. It started with a handshake, not a warm one, not a real one, but the kind you give for cameras firm, over-rehearsed, and timed perfectly for the evening news. Autumn Wells had just finished playing at a small fundraiser for under-resourced schools. It was her first public performance since Julian's stroke, and she had agreed only after confirming there would be no press. But somehow, Senator Warren Tate was already there, smiling for the cameras, gripping Autumn's shoulder, whispering through his teeth, "Play nice. This could help us both." Senator Tate had recently announced his run for governor. He was polished, he was powerful, and he was desperate for a new narrative. His approval ratings had plummeted after being linked to Sterling Maddox's corporate lobbying. He needed a reset A symbol, something pure, something like Autumn. Within hours of that handshake, photos of them flooded the internet. Senator Tate partners with young musical prodigy for education reform. The face of compassion. Autumn Wells joins Tate's justice tour, except she hadn't. Autumn didn't even know what a justice tour was. And Melody? She was livid. "That man stood by Maddox while they tried to erase you," she said, pacing their living room, "and now he wants to use you as a shield." Autumn just sat on the couch, harmonica untouched in her lap. She understood enough. He was trying to make her a mascot. A soft story to smooth his rough edges. Julian, now in recovery, weighed in from his hospital bed. "People like him don't care about the truth," he said. "They care about the optics of truth." He looked directly at Melody. Don't let him package her into a headline. But it was already happening. Posters. Campaign emails. Even a billboard near downtown Atlanta showed Autumn's silhouette beside Tate's face with the words, "Voices that heal, visions that lead." And then came the invite. A primetime television town hall. Topic: Healing America's Divide. Featuring special guest, Autumn Wells. Melody nearly threw the letter away. But Autumn stopped her. She pointed to the date, then tapped her harmonica once. Melody hesitated. "You want to go?" Autumn nodded slowly. "Not for Tate. For herself? The night of the broadcast, Autumn sat backstage, watching Senator Tate rehearse soundbites in the mirror. He caught her watching and flashed that politician's smile. "Don't worry, kiddo. We'll get through this together." Autumn said nothing. She had brought her harmonica, but she had also brought something else, a sheet of paper, folded neatly in her pocket. She had written every word herself. When it was her turn to speak, the moderator asked, "Autumn, what do you think helps heal a divided country?" She didn't pick up the harmonica. She pulled out the paper, and she read, "Healing doesn't happen when someone more powerful tells you how to feel. It happens when someone powerful finally listens." The room went quiet. "I didn't come here to be someone's slogan. I didn't come here to help a campaign. I came because too many kids like me are only called miracles when it's convenient." She looked directly at the camera. "You can't celebrate me and ignore the world I come from." The moderator blinked. "So, you're not endorsing the senator?" Autumn shook her head. Then she picked up her harmonica and played just 4 notes, brief, solemn, haunting. The audience gave a standing ovation. Senator Tate smiled through clenched teeth. His campaign manager walked off set. The fallout was immediate. Tate's camp released a statement claiming miscommunication. Critics called Autumn naive. Supporters called her a national conscience. But Autumn didn't read the headlines. She went home, watered the marigolds, and took Titan on a walk. She wasn't trying to start a movement. She was just refusing to be used. That week, Autumn received a letter. No cameras, no public announcement, just a handwritten note from a 5th grader in Detroit. "I used to think quiet kids couldn't change things, but then I saw you. Now I think maybe I can too." Autumn pinned it to her wall. That was the only endorsement she ever needed. The wrought iron gates of the Maddox estate hadn't changed. Still towering, still cold, still guarded by men in tailored suits and expensive sunglasses who rarely blinked and never smiled. But this time, they opened for her. Autumn Wells, now 13, stepped out of the black sedan, harmonica in one hand, Titan on a leash in the other. Her mother, Melody, stood beside her. No camera crews, no reporters. Just quiet resolve. They'd been invited back, not by Sterling Maddox, by Dr. Camille Rhodes, the animal behaviorist who had first raised concerns about Titan's training, and the only member of the original gala staff who had stood up for Autumn that night. This time, the estate wasn't hosting a gala. It was hosting a truth commission. In the months since Autumn had turned down Senator Tate's campaign stunt, the country had entered what one columnist called the Wells era. School districts adopted inclusive arts programs in her name. Civil rights attorneys pushed for legislation to protect neurodivergent children in public and professional spaces. And Maddox Holdings, under mounting legal pressure, agreed to a formal public hearing to investigate racial and neurological bias in elite institutions. Autumn was invited not just as a guest, but as a witness. Inside the mansion's ornate ballroom once, glittering with champagne and silk gowns, stood rows of folding chairs and a single microphone on a small wooden stage. Gone were the chandeliers. Gone were the velvet ropes. In their place sat activists, lawyers, educators, children. Autumn took her seat near the front. She didn't fidget. She didn't look around. She was present. When Dr. Camille Rhodes opened the session, her voice trembled. This property once symbolized silence enforced by status. Today, it becomes a place where silence is reclaimed. Then she turned to Autumn. "You changed this room. Would you like to speak one more time?" Autumn stood. Titan followed quietly. And for a moment, the crowd held its breath. Would she speak? Would she play? Would she deliver one final performance? Autumn walked to the microphone, looked at the expectant faces, and slowly placed her harmonica on the ground. Then she spoke. "I don't need this anymore to be heard." A ripple of emotion swept through the crowd. Autumn paused. I used to think silence was the only thing I had. That the world would only listen if I gave them music. She looked toward the back of the room, where Sterling Maddox himself sat, grey-faced and sunken. But the truth is, the world doesn't need more performances. It needs more people willing to listen to those who never had a stage. She smiled soft, unwavering. So today, I'm not playing. I'm just standing here. Because sometimes, that's enough. The room erupted, not with applause, but with quiet nods, teary eyes, hands over hearts. The kind of response that doesn't need noise to be loud. Autumn stepped down and returned to her seat. Titan curled beside her again, just like the very first time. After the session, Sterling Maddox approached. Slow, measured, no security detail. Just a Manonce feared, now humbled. He stopped a few feet from Autumn and lowered his gaze. I can't undo what I did. But I can say I see now what I refused to see then. Autumn didn't answer, but she did something she hadn't done all day. She picked up her harmonica, played just 2 notes, then walked away. No anger, no permission, just closure. In the months that followed, Autumn declined every major interview. She refused brand deals, denied merchandise offers, and turned down the starring role in a film based on her life. Instead, she and Melody started a foundation, the Titan Truster community-based music and therapy center for neurodivergent youth and rescue animals. Its motto? Some stories aren't told, they're felt. Autumn never disappeared. She just chose where to show up. Sometimes at local schools, playing harmonica for kids in sensory-safe classrooms. Sometimes at City Hall, silently observing hearings on inclusion and justice. Sometimes often at home, barefoot in the backyard, teaching Titan new tricks and planting flowers beside her Uncle Julian, who now walked with a cane but still read poetry aloud on Sunday afternoons. She didn't need the world's attention because she had already changed it. And one day, when asked by a young girl at the Titan Trust if she'd ever play again on a big stage, Autumn smiled gently and replied, I might, but only if there's someone in the back who needs to hear it. Because for Autumn Wells, silence was never the absence of voice. It was the space where the most important truths were finally allowed to breathe. Sometimes the loudest voices are the ones that never speak. Autumn Wells, a young black girl with autism who doesn't use words, showed the world that authentic presence, quiet courage, and steady kindness can shake even the highest walls of power. In a society that often praises flash over depth and noise over meaning, Autumn reminds us that true strength lies in integrity, not volume. She didn't fight with fists or slogans. She didn't chase fame. She simply stood her ground through music, through silence, and through truth. And in doing so, she changed lives. For anyone who has ever felt overlooked or underestimated, especially those in the later chapters of life, Autumn's story is a gentle yet powerful reminder. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to perform to matter. And you're never too quiet or too old to make a difference. Her journey teaches us that sometimes the most profound impact comes not from what we say, but from who we choose to be when the world is watching.